Hi everyone, this is a recorded lecture, Chapter 1, Introduction to Group Counseling. So what you'll find when you get out onto the job market is there is a definite increased use of using group counseling. Groups are really positive. People get a lot out of them. In some settings and populations, they're a better use of our time as counselors than individual. And you're not going to find many settings that don't utilize group counseling in some capacity. In fact, most, I think, in the Philadelphia area are now leaning towards a model that offers more group than individual. And while the author of this book says you may need more training, I'm going to go ahead and say you're definitely going to need more training, and that this course is meant to provide a foundation for you. I encourage you to review the information on the Association for Specialist in Group Work, their website. I've posted that in the classroom. And group counseling is a requirement for licensure and for your first credential through the NBCC. So why do we choose to lead groups? Groups provide a fantastic foundation for people to experience commonality. So for example, people in recovery or also experiencing depression and anxiety, eating disorder, racial trauma. There's lots of different reasons why it's important for people to come together and explore common experiences. You're going to get more of a variety of a point of view. This is why groups are so impactful for adolescents. There's a real sense of belonging. Isolation is chronic in our country. It leads to all kinds of mental health illnesses, and group can be a great place for people to practice their social skills. And as you can see here, there's skill building, lots of psychoeducational groups offered out there, informing people about their diagnosis or about self-care practices. There's, clients can experiment, if maybe you're in a group. I ran a group for moms that had children with substance abuse disorders, and we would practice in the group, give them an opportunity to practice with each other about what they might want to share with their child. There is a commitment, if you come to the end of the group and it's a time limited group, let's say for 8 sessions, the client has the ability to reflect and have mastery over what they've just learned. And while we are not responsible for the outcome, because that really depends on how hard the clients are willing to work, we are responsible for the group. And that means establishing safety, making sure people are involved and getting what they need out of the group, facilitating it, and making sure that, that we're offering what we're offering. So group actually has specific advantages over individual counseling. Again, you can practice social skills, you can build connection, you can have, recognize that you're not the only one suffering in the way that you're suffering. You might also learn some ways to suffer better. It is also not for everyone. I definitely would say, just based on my clinical experience, that when clients are suffering with personality disorders, they're not always a great fit for group. And, if someone has complicated trauma, they're definitely, then that really requires individual counseling, and group might be counterproductive. And so there are really sort of 2 main types of group, and with lots of choices underneath each one. So there are groups where it's leader directed, and that means you as the facilitator is active and directive in structuring the group and leading the group through the process. CBT groups are typically leader directed. Whereas process groups that might draw from psychodynamic theories are group directed, and the leader is really there just to facilitate what's called the group process, and so helping deepen the process, deepening clients' awareness about the content and what's being discussed. And, really what I have found is, depending on the individual's theoretical orientation, you're going to have a bias towards wanting to do a leader-directed or a group-directed group. And I think this is really also influenced by the population that you're working with, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Theory is commonly used in group counseling and psychotherapy. We'll be looking at a bunch of different theories over the course of this course together. I often use relational cultural theory as the basis for facilitating group, but certainly REBT, CBT, transactional analysis. There's lots of different theories to guide a group experience. And there's also different kinds of groups. So, a discussion group or a psychoeducational group or a group that might be working towards a particular task do not need a counseling theory. And there are all different kinds of groups. An educational group, maybe I want to learn more about mindfulness. Maybe it's a discussion group about racial trauma, self-compassion. Maybe there is a task group looking for ways to, advance policies for counselors. Growth and experiential groups tend to be more process-oriented. I always recommend, when possible, that new clinicians participate in a growth or experiential group. And there are also support and self-help groups, right? I think Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, is a very popularly known support self-help kind of group. And people come to group because it increases their knowledge. It gives them tools, that they might not have had before because, again, for example, when I was running the group for moms that had a child that were dealing with substance abuse concerns, they would trade information about resources in the community, resources for themselves, ways of setting structure and boundaries for their children. And most of that, that was really a facilitated group. I did not structure it in a way for that to occur. Once a good group is working, it kind of facilitates itself in a lot of different ways, which we will learn about together this quarter. Task groups, again, we're focusing on conferences, social actions, study circles. Both Professor Corbin and I are involved with the Greater Area Philadelphia Counseling Association, which we all want to encourage you to join. And we do a lot of task-based group work once a month on Saturday. Psychoeducational groups really came out of actually inpatient settings, but they're really used everywhere now. And this is where you're really helping your client to understand what is going on. It might be pathology related. So you might be doing a psychoeducational group on ways to provide self-care when you're having a manic episode. Psychoeducation has been very popular for individuals with schizophrenia. That's actually where psychoeducational groups grew out of. I offer as a college counselor, which is where I did the majority of my clinical work, I offered many psychoeducational groups on things like test anxiety, mindfulness, self-compassion, assertiveness skills. So we know knowledge empowers our clients, and so the more we can do this, the better. In counseling groups, we're really focusing on the interpersonal process, and a lot of this is about, really about self-awareness. We might not be necessarily, bringing, highlighting for the group members what they should get out of it. It's really, they're getting out of it what they need based on the group experience. Goals of group are typically, might be to develop positive attitudes or better interpersonal skills. It might be about behavior change, maybe a group around wanting to quit smoking. These are all the different, there's so many reasons to use a group. Uh, it's hard to even imagine beginning a full list. In fact, what I would say to you is think about who would you want to be in a group with as you're beginning to think about where you want to, be in the job market. We talked already a little bit about this, oh no, that was psychoeducation. This is psychotherapy. So psychotherapy groups tend to be more depth oriented and definitely around self-awareness. You might see psychotherapy groups in inpatient settings for, psychopathology, eating disorder groups, clients with PTSD. This is typically where you see the use of psychotherapy groups. Brief group therapy is really popular because of the number one reason here is that it's economically preferred. And so typically these groups are 1 to 4 session. For example, I have a supervisee who just offered 4 sessions on mindful movement. That might be one example of a brief group therapy. And no matter what we're doing, always when we're working with people, we are aware of our biases and our cultural paradigm. My favorite model to use is Pamela Hayes's addressing model. It's just a way of making sure that you're fully aware of all that is encapsulated when we're thinking about culture and how we might be similar and different from those we're working with. And we know that when counselors go into settings and are not mindful of their culture-bound values and ideas, that our group members terminate, and that marginalized populations terminate at a much higher rate than their white counterparts. And that we really need to be aware of our power, privilege, and oppression. And we will be constantly reflecting on that in our group experience. As someone who uses relational cultural theory, I don't believe that you can really even engage in therapy without being aware of the role culture and power are playing in an individual or group session. It's critical that professional counselors engage in regular self-reflection. I have actually a group of colleagues that we get together and engage in culture specific related self-reflection so that we are continually aware of our biases and how they are influencing the way that we work with clients. And it's important to know that group is one of these things that takes a long time to get comfortable with. I want to say that I did not feel real comfortable running a group for 3 years. I had a lot of anxiety as an introvert and just somebody who really prefers a one-on-one. But what I can say is that it's sort of like that 10,000 hour rule. Once you do it a lot, you'll come to really enjoy it. I now prefer group to individual. So it just goes to show that once you really feel like you have a good, knowledge base that you can be intentional with your skill in group, it might become your preferred way of leading. But that really means being aware of verbal and nonverbal methods, being flexible, being aware of, educating people and that everybody's coming in, with different assumptions and needs. So when we're talking about what it means to be a good group counselor, we are self-aware, we are in a continual process of self-reflection and self-understanding. I really want to encourage you to make mistakes. And that might seem strange to say, but we are role modeling for our clients what it means to be human. And we now live in a society that does not really value authenticity. And so I want to encourage you to be fearlessly authentic in your compassion, in your empathy for your clients. And if you make a mistake, that's honestly sometimes a gift in a group setting because it gives you the opportunity to show your clients, how they can come back from a mistake, and really be vulnerable. And it doesn't mean that they need to shut down because they're feeling shame or blame, guilt. The importance of modeling, right? We want to model the behavior we want for our clients. And so I encourage you to try this out within our group. What kind of behaviors do you wish that your group members would exhibit? Many of our clients come to us never having a positive relationship in their life. And so this might be the first one they're having. And so what do you want them to take from the group experience with you? I want to encourage you to have a regular mindfulness practice, and we can talk a little bit more about this as a group. Being authentic, and you might have heard this before, it's kind of cliche, but trust the process. And this is a belief that if you engage in group process, that the process itself will lead you to the end that you need it to be. And in the beginning of doing group, it feels like you can't trust, the process, but in fact, um, the more that you do, the more that you trust the people in the group, the more that you trust your skill, the more that you have a belief that the group will be, impactful for clients, the more likely you'll have a positive outcome. Be open. Groups are a constant learning experience for me as well as my clients. And we all get defensive. Defenses are a good thing, but we just need to be aware of the fact that um, conflict's going to come up in group. And so how can we hold that for our clients and deal with our difficult emotions well, and how to model that? Uh, in terms of running a group, like personal skills for you, groups take some energy. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I sort of, before I begin a group, I ground myself. I do a self-compassion meditation, and then I get my energy up, because if I want people to be involved, you gotta put some energy into that space. Again, I'm going to keep coming back to this idea of self-awareness, a commitment to self-care. Groups can really burn you out when you're doing too many of them, and you're not working a real self-care, what I might call a self-care recovery model for yourself. And I think more than anything, it's so important to have a good sense of humor. I use humor all the time in group. And at the end of the day, a successful group really just comes down to our use of basic counseling listening skills. Do our clients feel heard? Do they feel appreciated? Do they feel the compassion? And all of that comes through our basic counseling skills. When my supervisees tell me that they are feeling stuck in a group process, I often ask them, how are you using your skills? How are you using your theory? These are our foundation. If we had, like, Maslow's hierarchy here, I would say these are the foundation of any work that we're doing. And so keep practicing these skills with everybody and anybody that you can. And that's it for this review, and I'll see you for the next recording.